mini lesson. I will put you in your reading groups. You get your reading partner in your book. And you'll begin reading. Okay? Now, some of you will need to go to the library to pick up your book. I have some of them here, but some of you will need to go somewhere to get it. All right? Any questions before we start? Okay, so how many of you were here in grades 4 and 5? Or grades 4, just grade 4. You were here. How many of you were here in grade 5?
Wait, what? Oh.
Many of you, right? So you may remember the books and the units, The Tiger Rising. And you like that book?
Oh, yes.
And what about Home of the Brave?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Rosenthal?
Yeah,
He's told me all about you. He's my good friend.
He's a really nice mustache.
Still here.
I saw him yesterday.
So, you also read Home of the Brave.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe not.
You are not here.
So, the unit we're starting now is just like that. We're going to read, you're reading fiction, and we're talking about character. Okay, and our goal in this unit is to take your understanding of character even further, right? To pick up where you left off. Hey, you guys, it looks like you're too close together. Okay, it's not a roller coaster. I don't know what's going on back there. But in this unit, we're going to use a read aloud. We're not going to use a whole novel as the mentor text like you did in those earlier units. We're going to use this. It's called First French Kiss and Other Traumas. First French Kiss and Other Traumas. So this is a story about one boy, Will, and the experiences he has growing up. All right, and the book or the story we'll read today, in the next few days, is about Will as a 4th grader wanting to be popular. It's called popularity. All right, that's what our first story will be from here. So if you look up here, we got a new goal today to see the characters are complicated and show more than one trait. There's a lot of room right here, guys. All right, a lot of room right here. And then you'll see that I cleaned off, I got rid of our writing anchor charts. I started a new one. It's called Think Deeply About Characters. To think deeply about characters. And it says, expect characters to be complicated and show more than one trait. So, you guys, as expert writers, you know that we use what the character does and what the character says as a way to teach the reader about who our characters really are. Right? And we talk about character traits. Right? And if they're complicated, they have many traits, and some of them are opposite. Like she's really smart, but very shy. Or is very kind, but easily agitated. Has a bad temper. Right? So these traits, they're not all good, they're not all bad, they're a mix, right? And that makes our character complicated. We know that authors do this on purpose, right? Because that's the way we wrote our stories yesterday and in weeks past. So, beginning right now, as readers, and as readers who are starting new books today, starting new stories, we're going to zoom in, we're going to focus in on character traits from the beginning. Alright? So as I read the parts of this story today, you're thinking to yourself, who is Will? Okay, Will's the main character, right? But who is he really? So in the writing unit, we always said, what's the story really about? Now we're asking, who is Will, or who is the main character really? So we're going to dig deeper than what's written there on the page. Right? Will is a student, so we want to dig deeper. Who are they at their core? What are they about? That's our focus for this unit, okay? And we're going to start by thinking about it in this story. So as I read, what do strong readers do while they read? Albert just did it. What's it called?
Annotate. Wait, what? No, that's not.
Jot.
Annotate.
Pine nuts. Nobody gets my joke? Come on, where's Ethan?
There.
Is Ethan here? You usually get my notes, my jokes. Pine nuts. Jot. Like jot-ju.
Oh.
Ah.
Hey, I
Good
never
joke.
get. I never get any of your
It sounds more like a dog.
You guys are poor. I think you left your sense of humor in PE. Anyway, here we go. So as I read, when you hear something or you have an idea about the character, you're going to write it down. Because I'm going to ask you to share when I stop. Okay? Here we go.
Who's the character's name?
Will. William. My name. Popularity. Somewhere inside me, I knew that 10-year-old boys were not supposed to spend recess circling oak trees in search of four-leaf clovers. Still, that's what I and my equally unpopular acquaintances, Alan Gold and Alan Shipman, were doing while the rest of our classmates played tag and kickball and pushed each other higher and higher on the swings. Aside from having a little more than our share of baby fat, the two Allens and I had very little in common. In fact, we could barely stand one another. Still, during recess, we were the only company we had, so we tried to make the best of it. Now and then, one of us would bend forward, pick up a clover, examine it, shake his head, and let it fall to the ground. Got one, Alan Gold said. Let's see, Alan Shipman said. Alan showed Alan the clover. No, that's only 3. No, that's 4, right here. See? That's not a whole leaf, Alan Shipman said sourly. That's 1 leaf, 2 leaves, 3 leaves, 4 leaves. That's not a whole leaf. We had been looking for 4-leaf clovers every school day for 6 months. And each of us knew exactly what he would do if he ever found one. He would hold the lucky clover tight in his hand, close his eyes, and wish he was so popular that he would never have to spend time with the other 2 again. Alright, so I'm going to stop there. And just to help you guys, just to demonstrate, I'm going to show you what I'm thinking about Will. Okay? So I think back to the story, and as I read, one thing that jumped out at me is the word bitter. Bitter.
They eat the clover.
So what's bitter mean?
Like a taste.
Like a taste.
Medicine. No, medicine.
So, you guys, I think what we're looking for, you guys are thinking of the taste, right? But this is a characteristic, a trait, bitter. And I think it's this.
Stop.
Bitter. So, James, what that means is like he's disgusted at his current position in the world.
Yes, I don't understand Korean.
Yeah, I know, that's why I'm explaining it to you.
Well, did you explain that to Daryl too?
Yes.
What Daryl just
No, there are no.
So, I have this idea about Will, right? And I think, it doesn't say Will is bitter, right, in the story. But I think that it's clear that he's unhappy to be friends or to be hanging out with Alan and Alan. Right? Because his wish, when he finds that four-leaf clover, and when you find a four-leaf clover, you make a wish. Right? That's how the thing works. And his wish would be to never see Alan and Alan again. Right? So I feel that he's bitter, pretty unhappy that he's been hanging out with these guys for 6 months. Okay. Did you guys have any other thoughts about Will? What kind of person is he?
He's kind of weird.
Kind of weird? Why do you think he's weird?
I mean, why would you search for a clover for 6 months straight? Isn't that just kind of weird?
Okay, so kind of weird, maybe immature, like not what
Yes.
other fourth graders
Very
do.
immature.
All right, so I'm going to write that. Down. Here.
That's all.
Immature. Okay, and James gave us some evidence for that, right? He's picking up clovers at lunchtime. That's more like a first grade thing to do. Right?
I think it's not that weird, like if he just like go to different trees, but he's just circling one tree.
Guys, it's disrespectful, right? James is talking.
He's just circling one tree, so that's what makes it weird.
So he's circling one tree, and that's weird. Okay. All right, the point is, right, this is the first few paragraphs of the story, and where we got our eyes focused on the character. Who is he? Right, how can we describe him, and what evidence supports that description? Now I'm going to move on. You guys are thinking the same thing. Your jot ideas you have, or hold them tightly in your brain, okay? Here we go. Got one, Alan Shipman said. Alan Gold swiped the clover from him. 1, 2, 3, he said, throwing it to the ground. There's 4 there. That was a 4-leaf clover. Pick it up. You pick it up. You pick it up. You. While the 2 Allens faced off, I looked across the black tar and asphalt at a crowd of boys who were making more noise and seemed to be having more fun than anyone else on the playground. These were the popular boys, and in the center of this group stood their leader, Sean Owens. Sean Owens was the best student in 4th grade. He was also one of the humblest, handsomest, strongest, fastest, most clear-thinking 10-year-olds that God ever placed on the face of the earth. Sean Owens could run the 50-yard dash in 6 seconds, hit a baseball 200 feet, and throw a football 40 yards. Looks like half the field. The only thing Sean didn't have was a personality. He didn't need one. When you can hit a baseball 200 feet, all you have to do is round the bases and wait for the world's adulation. I gazed at Sean and the rest of the popular boys in bewildered admiration. It seemed like only yesterday that we had all played kickball, dodgeball, and basketball together. And then one morning I awoke to find this happy democracy had devolved into a monarchy of kings and queens, dukes and duchesses, lords and ladies. It did not take a genius to know that upon the continent of this playground, the 2 Allens and I were stable boys, peasants, not kings, not queens. I had been resigned to the rank for many months, but now, looking at the 2 Allens, still arguing over the same 3-leaf clover, then at the popular boys, I suddenly knew that I could not stand another day at the bottom. I wanted to be a part of the noise and the laughter. I needed to be popular. Okay, so share what you wrote down. Share your thinking. Tell them why.
Will is determined to be. Yes.
He's eager to be different. And he's
Do you think the albums are...
Okay. Now, here's some things I heard. Desperate. Desperate. Now, as you read, I saw a lot of this. Okay, but we need to think of that head nod as a trigger that asks, why do you think that? Okay, so that head nod, right? Instead of just saying, oh yeah, me too, right? I want you to demand evidence. So why do you think that? What in the story makes you think that Will is desperate? Well, he says it directly. He needs to be popular. He needs to be part of that group. Okay? Anything else in that section show you that he is desperate? It's okay. What else did you say to each other? Other ideas? I heard lots of talking. I heard someone say determined. Right? Who said determined? Jim 2. Envious. So when we talk to each other, we want to ask these questions, right, of our partners. Why do you think that way? What does the character say or do that suggests they are envious or determined or desperate or immature or bitter? Okay? So that's good. That's exactly what we need to be thinking as we read. Okay, I'm going to go on now. Okay? I'm going to read a little more. And again, you're doing the same thing. What new things do we learn about the character? Okay? What things that we've already talked about might be supported in this section? Okay? Being 10 years old, I did not question this ambition. But I did wonder how on earth I was going to realize it. Though I only stood 20 yards from the heart of the kingdom, I felt 1,000 miles removed from the rank and prestige of its citizens. How could I bridge such a gap, knowing I might be stared at, or laughed at, or belittled to a speck so small that I could no longer be seen by the naked eye? And as I stood on the playground, torn between fear and ambition, those 20 yards began to recede from view, and I knew that I must either step forward now or retreat forever to a life of bitter companions and three-leaf clovers. I took a deep breath and then, with great trepidation, crossed the 20 longest yards I had ever walked in my life and found myself standing a few feet from the outer circle of what I hoped was my destiny. I lowered my head a little so as not to draw attention to myself and watched and listened. Mitch Brockman, a lean, long-faced comic, considered by many to be the funniest boy in the 4th grade, was in the middle of a story that had something to do with Tijuana and a Wienermobile. I wasn't sure what the story was about, but there was a lot of body English and innuendo, all of which the crowd seemed to find absolutely hilarious. I noticed that every time Mitch said something funny, he eyed Sean Owens to see if he was laughing. He was, silently. His mouth was open, but it was the laughter of the other boys that filled the silence. And I realized then that Mitch was Sean's jester. As long as he could make Sean laugh, he was assured a prominent position in the group. I wondered what my position in the group might be. I certainly wasn't a great athlete, student, or ladies' man, but I did have a sense of humor. Maybe I could be the second funniest boy in the 4th grade. My thoughts went no further because the bell ending recess rang. But that night, just before I fell asleep, I saw myself standing in the center of the popular boys telling the funniest stories anyone had ever heard. I saw Sean Owens doubled up with laughter. I saw myself triumphant.